Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Good morning, good morning. My name is Andrea Simintov, and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, coming to you straight from the Jewish heartland, the land of Israel, and the holy city of Jerusalem. All right, so I'm already laughing. I'm laughing because I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed because I don't feel well today, and laid awake all night, eyes bugging open, thinking, oh, Lord, don't let me have corona. Don't let me have been infected with COVID-19. I have a flu. I have a flu and a sore throat. We'll check it out today, but we're fine. So if it sounds a little low-key today, if my rants sound a little less crazed, consider yourselves lucky. I know my husband does. All right, so let me say good evening, good morning to everybody listening in from around the world, and of course later on the podcasts, but listening in live this morning, we have a very perky crowd. We have people listening in from the U.S. and of course Eretz Israel, Canada. Every week we have these lovely Canadians listen. That's how I know that things are good, when we have Canadians listening in. The UK, Germany, Poland, India, Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, and Slovenia. Wow, haven't seen Slovenia in a while. So good morning, good evening, and welcome to our holy show from our holy land. Today we're actually going to repeat at the end of the show last week's Parsha, Shalach, because I decided to catch up with the rest of the world. As many of you regular listeners know, at this time of the year, we are a year ahead in our Torah reading here in the land of Israel. But I'm going to glom onto my delicious Galut brothers. All right, and let's see what else. The streets are still burning, people are still sick, governments are in fear of toppling, and it is a sunny, beautiful day in Israel. And the chat room is open. Send me a note. Let me know that you're listening in. I forgot to sign in. I'll do it myself right now. And guess what? I'll see you on the other side.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, Pull Up a Chair, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Okie doke. So here we I am looking now. I signed into the chat room, finally signed into the chat room. Oh, there's my cup of water. All right, mellow show, because I'm mellowly not feeling well. But I am with you, and it's so, guess what? It's an honor to have you listening in and to spend this time together. All right. So yesterday I went to, this happens to me all the time, by the way, in the era of Corona. So I ask you all to just cut me some slack. I don't go out. I've developed a very profound sense of agoraphobia. I love staying home, hiding home. But every once in a while, I do sneak out and I think, gee, the world is open. They, the infamous they, told me that I can go out. They told me I can eat out. They told me to go to, yes, IKEA. So I, with a girlfriend yesterday, masked, schwitzing, hot, sweating. We went to IKEA. And of course, as soon as I come home, I'm not feeling well. The throat is hurting. Definitely, I got it. People are rude, although I must tell you the staff was very, very good. Did not let people in without wearing the masks. But I mean, you can't babysit for everybody. Walking around masks hanging under their chins. More about that later, okay? But nevertheless, I came across a post and somebody wrote that, she had been eating in a well-known restaurant in Jerusalem and that you could see the chef cutting up vegetables with only one glove on, handling his cell phone. I see pictures of people this is like an aside, people that I know and love, saying, yay, restaurants are open in Boston and New York, drinking cups of wine, annoyed that they have to eat outside. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? Why are you eating out now? What gods are you defying? Indeed, the chutzpah. What you're going to bring home to your house? Say I'm wrong. I remember for years, I travel a lot, really not by design, not because of, because I'm a world-class bon vivant. But no, I have children and parents and overseas, and I have to travel. And I used to laugh at those Asians. Oh, those kooky Asians, all masked. You know what? They were masked for me. A sense of caring for their fellow man. A sense of not just themselves, but the dignity of not wanting to infect others. So don't sit and post and say, I was at a restaurant and I told him, your cell phone is there and you touched yourself. What are you doing there? Why are you out? The same thing. And then somebody said, I went to an ice cream parlor and he only had one glove on and he was taking money in the glove and scooping it. How badly did you want that ice cream? I have to tell you, I know where to get pints of ice cream that haven't been touched by other people in the middle of the night. I know where to get it. All right. So let's see. Let's get my rant started. We'll go into the dirty Jew comments afterwards. Yeah. Okay. So my main source these days of human communication, aside from my husband, the holy Ronnie, who I think is getting a little tired. He's spinning and spinning. He's spinning his brains out. He brought a spinning bike home, and he spins whenever he's not out in public. But anyway, so I spend a lot of time looking at Facebook, a lot of time listening to podcasts, a lot of times checking the news. And I'm fascinated at, indeed, how many people have become pundits, that's the word, experts on everything. I used to say the three most important words that I think are, I don't know. I love you also works, but if you don't have anyone to say that to, I don't know. Let me learn. These are nice 3-word sentences. Instead, I see everybody posting every thought. They get an itch under their armpit and they say, let me post my views. While they're sitting in their fancy California home, sitting in their palatial Connecticut estates, sitting in their splanch houses on Long Island, and they're out there protesting, not even knowing. And I'm talking about Jews. Yeah, I'm talking about Jews out there protesting, lending support. Just something that sounds so holy. What could be wrong about not just equality, but rights, being colorblind? What is wrong about that? There's nothing wrong about that. Unless there's a hidden agenda that says, you, Jew, under it all are the enemy. You know what? You're allowed to sit something out until you know more. You're allowed to sit something out and say, I don't know. Let me learn. If other Jews like me are telling you, read the manifest. Read what they've been saying Black Lives Matter for a long, long, long time, and it's never been inaccurate. It is accurate. But when they become unified And the underlying rumble, the rumble and the heartbeat and the rage underneath somehow has something to do with you, Jew, in your evilness, in your secret desire to take over the world. You have an obligation to learn. You're a parent. You're a relative. You're a community member. No more. And to the protesters who are imposing morality to those, and you know who you are, and those of us who sit in silence and shake and say, she really shouldn't say these things. You know who they are. There are those out there with no historical record, personal records of taking the high road, who are instead grabbing the lectern and imposing to others. What has happened to humility? Let me think. To all of you, I actually saw this. I couldn't believe this. I don't think I said this on last week's show. I was shocked. I saw a Shiva tent. You know, today you can't sit Shiva inside. That's the 7 days of mourning after the death of a loved one. So we sit Shiva at home and people come. And in holy Israel, you don't even have to know the mourners. They put signs up all over Jerusalem, all over Israel, and you can show up because it is such an honor. And suddenly, I see out of some kind of, I think it's a renewal congregation, a Jewish renewal it was called. Correct me if I'm wrong and you know more. They set up a Shiva tent, a mourner's tent, for George Floyd, the man who started, whose death, whose horrific, caught on video, shameful death was caught and published around the world. A Shiva tent. And I want to know. And there are people walking past there and say, oh, look at this lovely Jewish gesture. Hipster Jewish gesture. And I want to know if the, quote, mourners for I keep saying, forgive me, I want to say Floyd George, like Boy George. For George Floyd, do they know what Shiva is? The intensity, the humility, the reflective, the time where we literally step out of who we are and let the universe flow as it was designed by holy God. No, this was a political statement, hijacking something that smelled a little Jewish, tasted a little Jewish. It's nice. Sort of like a pastrami on rye. I call it the Knish tent. And for those of us who live Judaism and try our darndest and try every day, every moment, every second to get it right, hijacking that which is holy, zebusha. When someone asks you, not yet observant Jewish brother and sister, what do Jews believe? Can you really answer? Or are we so enmeshed in the cultures of others that we can't even answer these questions? I'm not talking about a reform answer. I'm not talking about a conservative answer, not a renewal answer, and not an orthodox answer. That's crap. What do Jews believe? The next answer can be, with dignity, I don't really know. Let me learn. And before we go to our first break, I just want to tell you something. Since when is being a jerk crime? A lot of jerks out there, and jerks are called to the carpet, and jerks, Hollywood actors losing their jobs because they said something which today, well, let me see what time, at 6 a.m. was perceived as racist. At 9 may be okay, but yesterday was just Jim Dandy, and next week will be Busha. They should be killed, burned at the stake. And what are some of the protests? That the sensitivities of young children who are forming their sense of self is hurt. Well, you know what? Last time I looked, that was the job of a family. A family is a place to practice for the future, to study nice talk, to study politeness, to study discourse before venturing out to the great outdoors and showing what we've learned. What is learned? What has happened to the art of ignoring discernment and saying, this has nothing to do with me. See you on the other side.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things, but at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
And we're back. Andrea Simantov, pull up a chair, talking to you from holy Jerusalem. You know, life isn't perfect. I can't wait to get to the Devar Torah section. Life isn't perfect, in case you didn't get the memo. All right. And I go through testy days here. I really do. But to be living in the land of our forefathers, the land of our ancestors, the only Jewish country on the face of the earth. It's okay. It's okay. Who am I to postulate? It's okay. It's okay if you're Jewish and don't live here. I guess it's okay. I don't really know. It's not for me to say. But you know what? Don't kid yourself and think that there's parity. I have spoken at other times where it says, in the Torah, it said, God's hand, God said, God saw. And I remember when I was first coming into Torah observance, took a lot of classes, more classes than I have taken recently, and I really should up my learning because I don't know. And I remember younger hearing, it says God's hand because we're limited in our understanding. What God has is something so we say God's hand so that we can understand it in our limited human way. And that was it said, God saw, God, No, they had it wrong. If it says God's hand, then God has the hand. We are created in his image. And what we have as a dumbed down example is a hand-ish. Created in his image, God has the hand. Our hand is supposed to emulate God's hand. If God reaches, God touches, God uplifts. We have handishes to do the same thing. If God speaks and with his words create the world, well, so can we. Speak-ish. Okay? So, don't kid yourself. If we were told to live in the land of Israel, that is the emes. That is the truth. And then there's Jewish life-ish. It's nice. We replicate. We build beautiful communities, beautiful synagogues, beautiful centers of Jewish learning and of simcha, and certainly an abundance of kosher restaurants. But don't lie to yourselves. Understand, develop the humility each day and say, what I'm doing is ish. I'm doing the ish because I have elderly parents, because I need to make my parnasa, because I prefer a lawn, because I really don't like Israelis. Whatever your line is, but there's no parity. All right. Said in ironic, this week, June 14th, what is today? Today's what, the 17th, I think, the 18th? So 3-4 days ago, there was an anti-racism protest in Paris. And what was the overriding chant? dirty Jews. Yeah. So, and of course the police are investigating because we need non-Jews to help us and to protect us when we can't even protect ourselves because we don't even know who we are. And of course, it was probably filled with Jews there on this anti-racism rally because Jews are always at the forefront of anti-racism and moral causes and uplifting those who are behind the eight ball. So instead, justice for victims of anti-white crimes, and Jews are suddenly Semitic Jews and certainly French Moroccans, right, from North Africa are the whites that are being protested. So in today's world, the hypersensitivity, Jews are considered white enough to hate. No, they're just Jews. It doesn't matter. And racism is definitely bad, but Jew hatred is somehow okay. Got it? Got it. Okie doke. So we're there. I hope the engineer keeps me posted because I see him on some rants today. Here we go. Never again. That's my favorite. When people get up and they march on Holocaust Day and they say, never again, never again. Yeah, never again. How embarrassing to hear. Because I got a secret for you. We're seeing again. And again is happening, rising, emerging because of neglect, because of cowardice, because of fecklessness. What I am not saying, and this needs to be heard and this needs to be clear, I am not talking about a new, racist, angry, fists in the air, destroy everything about you, Jew. I'm talking about the brilliance and the morality and the tug of war, the spiritual, intellectual, and emotional tug of war that has absolutely identified the Jewish personality since the beginning of time. Since when did we become ashamed of ourselves, that we cower, that we let others tell us what to do with our land and what part of our God-given land, and if that wasn't good enough, then we'll let the UN mandate it. What has happened to us? So desperate to be loved. But one day a year, 2 days a year, we say, never again, never again. Busha. Embarrassing. There are conspiracies against us. We are not welcome. But we grab our rightful place. And I got to tell you something, boys and girls, anti-Semitism is not. You know what? I read that it's not only a Jewish problem. Frankly, I don't even think it's a Jewish problem. I don't even think it's a problem. Because here comes a 3-word sentence for you. I don't care. I've been given my 60, 70, 80, 90, 120 years to live God's truth, to practice my religion, not know my religion, not master my religion, the halacha, the mitzvot, the commandments, the law, to every day paint on my canvas and hope I get it right. And if I don't get it right, that God that loves me will give me another canvas the next day. It's not a Jewish problem. I got to tell you something. If you're a Jew who doesn't know who you are, it is a problem. If you are a non-Jew, I can promise you something. Anti-Semitism is your problem too. If you care about Jews and you care about Israel and you care about your fellow human beings, we have a sickness. Let's think outside the box. But don't pour good energies after bad and wring your hands and feel that you've done the job when you say never again. Never again is up to you. You can shout it or you can live it. All right. Yeah, we're not going to read about celebrities who got fired from their TV shows for alleged racism because it's just too tedious. It's also about actors Okay, actors. Frank, send me your question. Frank has a question about Aliyah, and I'm not going to answer it on the show today because I have so much to cover. But Frank, write to me at andrea@israelnewstalkradio.com, and I will talk about coming and visiting you. I want to do some traveling when this is over. Okay, so send me your notes, everybody. andrea@israelnewstalkradio.com, and I will be happy to get back to you. All right, let's see. Let's go through. Wait a second. You hear my papers going? My papers going? You know what I think about actors. And I actually used to be an actress. A mediocre actress at back. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so listen, friends, before we go on. Oh, wait, this is important. Here, I have something important to tell you. There's a website I came across today. Again, this is not a blanket referral, but I think it's worth reading. Where is it? Here it is. There's going to be a 3-day vigil starting this Sunday, the Rose Gardens in Jerusalem, a 3-day vigil sponsored by an organization called Ribonut. Okay, Ribonut. And I want you to check out their website. It's good. It's interesting. It's good. It's good. Today, Frank. I thought you said one day, not one day, 2 day. Okay. It's www.ribonut, ribonut.co.il. The address will be posted on the summary for the show on the website. Check it out. It's going to be a 3-day vigil about sovereignty in our land. Okay? Let's see. A little more. This was a very interesting quote I came across. Joanna Hoffman. She was the right-hand man of Steve Jobs. And she referred to a new addictive drug out there called anger. I like that. She was talking about Facebook. She was talking about tweeting. She was talking about all of these new media platforms and how rage has become the new modus operandi. Very exciting. I thought that was an important article. Okay, we're running out of time. Masks. Hey, listen, jerks who aren't wearing masks, put them on. People in Asian countries, they put them on, they wear masks when they have a cold because they care about others. They're not calling about their oppression, their lack of self-expression. What are you, a bunch of toddlers, a bunch of jerks? You really are. And I have to tell you, I think I came across a great line. Narcissism. This is the new idolatry of the 21st century. It's the school of me, me, me. When we come back, we're going to talk about you, me, and those we love. Part.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simantov, pull up a chair, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You know, we did Parsha Shalach. Parsha is the Torah portion. Each week we divide the Torah up and we read a different section, and it never fails to not interest me, I mean blow me away, how the Parsha consistently seems to mirror the vibes of what is going on in the world. And so in Shalach, okay, so actually I have a few important things to throw out here. I was going to throw in some about Jewish anti-Semites, self-loathing Jews. I came across some articles in Haaretz, and I'm always warned not to read Haaretz because it will upset me, but I think it's important that I remain informed and also not become arrogant, to understand that there are those who believe differently than me, and we have to hear each other, not break each other's windows, hear each other. And even when we disagree, maybe there's something in there. You say, gee, you know what? I can hear it. Although I have to tell you, years ago, I was doing an article for a magazine, and I had to meet with a wine critic, a Jewish wine, not a wine critic, one of these sommeliers who did reviews of wines. And he was Jewish, living in the land of Israel. And his hatred of Torah observant Jews, his hatred of those who observe the laws of kashrut, keeping kosher, it was staggering. And I was, I thought I was kind of sophisticated. I wasn't at all. I had never met a Jew in Israel who really had great disdain for other Jews. But that was because I lived in a Jerusalem bubble. There's a lot outside. I came across another article last week written by a Haaretz writer who I will not mention. We won't get him extra readers, who is just nauseated, sickened. You could hear the bile and spit hitting his keyboard as he was writing about the birth rate of the settlers. He uses the word settlers as a derogatory term. I genuflect. I fall to my knees and say, my gosh, you holy people, doing what so many of us don't feel ready to do. So again, this is always eye-opening, but it's important. We're not all the same shade of gray. Okay, this week's Parsha Shalach. One thing I wanted to say, and I mentioned this last week, that today Jews share in this perhaps we share in this sin of the same sin of the spies. They were sent to find out, to talk about the topography, to talk about the geography, to tell the best routes, the best place to settle, the best place to plant, and instead they came back with what they weren't asked about. They put in their own value judgments, their own fears, their own terrors. So we sort of have this idea, and I'm going to debunk it a tad, that there's like an evilness denoted with the spies, okay? And we're going to address that a little bit because I found a flip side. But nevertheless, fear it's so crippling, and it is indeed, it's prevalent. The spies went to spy on the land, and so many come to tour the land of Israel, and they come back and they say, you know what, it's so beautiful. It's a land of milk and honey, but there's a lot of hostility around with their neighbors, and people forget that we are people of faith. If you put your faith first, faith is not an addendum to our lives. It's the oxygen of who we're supposed to be. And the faith that you can overcome economic obstacles, the faith that you will be safe in your land, the faith that comfort is not the name of the game. Remember that saying, he who dies with the most toys wins? The antithesis of Judaism. We witnessed an exodus from Egypt. We witnessed an ingathering of the exiles from Arab lands, from Ethiopia, from Russia, and yes, indeed, America. And yet we still lack a faith to settle in the land that was promised to us, not suggested. Israel isn't a place to run to as a last resort. It's the goal. And anything else is not reaching our goal, either a deliberate or accidental failure of efforts. So the other thing I wanted to say is, please, at your Shabbos table, okay? We all have our Shabbos tables. I don't know what your table looks like. I don't know what's going on in your house. But I know that I'm going to tell Holy Ronnie, we're going to discuss this week at the Shabbos table, that I have to translate. Okay, so in Bamidbar, the words, the land is a land. This is what the spies, the Miraglim, they come back and they say, the land is a land that eats up in its inhabitants, those that sit in it. So we're referring to the promised land where one cannot sit still in one place. In Israel, you don't grow old. You got to be foolish to grow old and to miss the opportunity to grow. In Israel, sitting can kill you, but to move onward and upward all of the time, climbing up to greater heights of Kedusha, sanctity we call it. Because if one ever stops climbing, you have to fall. It's like the ramp going up to the holy temple. It wasn't a ladder, it was a ramp. You stop walking on a ramp, you're going to topple downward. It was deliberate. It wasn't a failure of design. It wasn't a lack of imagination. It was dafka. It was deliberate. It wasn't steps that you could stop and rest and have a sip of your Diet Coke. That's what it's like to live here. Shalach. It is a land that consumed those. Moshe, we will call our beloved Moshe. He sends scouts to the land to report back. There's two questions. Why did these scouts, these Miraglim, disparage the prospect of entering the land that God promised them? And also, these scouts, they were handpicked. They were handpicked because they were in a higher spiritual standing. All of them were men of distinction. How could they have failed so dismally? The scouts weren't afraid that they couldn't conquer the land. They were afraid of what their lives would be like after they conquered the land. You know, it's very simple to say, they were afraid of battle, but this would only answer the first question and not the second about their spiritual level. If they were spiritual men, wouldn't their faith have told them this is great? So we have to have this deeper explanation. The scouts weren't afraid. They were afraid that by being engrossed in worldly affairs, they would be involved in agriculture, city building, commerce, government, book writing, movie acting. They would lose who they were. In the desert, they didn't have to worry about their work, their homes, their responsibilities other than their personal deepening and strengthening of faith. They were happy in their nomadic existence because it left them free to inhabit what the Kabbalah refers to as a plane of thought and speech rather than a plane of action. They were misguided. They forgot that God's purpose for them was not in a modified reality of the desert, but indeed bringing holiness into what we do in settling the land and dealing with the world. The central theme is about this ill-fated message. But we have to understand that what the Torah teaches us is that it's possible that leaders and scholars can indeed make mistakes regarding ritual matters, even regarding spiritual matters. All human beings, even the greatest, the most knowledgeable, we're fallible, we're subject to error. Moshe's greatness is that he was not ashamed to admit his mistake. It's a rare leader that can emulate a Moshe. Marxism, secularism, nationalism, assimilation, self-ghettoization, this is my favorite, self-ghettoization. That's a Rabbi Wein line. Everything's had its day. And believe me, the shouting, the imposed morality coming from the streets of Los Angeles and streets of New York, and indeed the foul streets of Paris, they'll have their day. Their line, their notation in history. But a realistic view of our current situation, our political situation, would lead to would lead any of us who are honest with ourselves to say that maybe we've lost our way. We've committed grievous errors, dangerous mistakes. No one is willing to say, I don't know. No one is willing to say that this is a case. It's the old mistaken mantras and policies. We do it again and again and impose upon one another. My friends, remaining blind to our past is going to mean again that we repeat them, leading to human error, tragic consequences. The lesson of this week's Parsha, this reading is that human beings err, but we need to recognize and react to this and readdress our spirituality and more deeply connect to who we are to avoid disaster. That's the connection that the spies have in the world we find ourselves enveloped today. Shabbat Shalom u'mivorach from Jerusalem.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.